Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Evolve Through God. My name is Angela Goodman. I am your host for this podcast. And today I have with me Brandon Bartron. And I had the pleasure of meeting Brandon at James Lawrence's Iron Hope book event. And Brandon is a good friend of James. And I knew from the second I met him, his energy and warmth is very infectious. And I'm so excited that he agreed to come on and talk with us today about his faith journey. So, Brandon, thank you for being here.
You're very, very welcome, and I'm very, very excited to be here. It was an absolute honor to go to James's event and meet so many precious souls, and you were definitely one of them. And so I'm so grateful to be here with you today.
Oh, it's the way life works and the way God works is so amazing because you go to those things and you don't have an idea of who you're going to meet when you're there, and then you get the opportunity to just meet people that you feel like God put in your path, and it's just awesome. So I don't want to delay. I want people to learn more about you because you are such an amazing soul. So let's start off. Let's talk about what was your introduction to God when you were younger. We'll kind of start there and weave our way through.
Yeah, so uh, there's usually two parts to that question. I think the first one is, my just internal connection with God, and the second one is, we'll call it organized religion.
Uh,
So with organized religion, I grew up with no religion until my mom got divorced and remarried a gentleman who was Mormon.
okay.
And so at the time, I was raised in Hawaii, hence all the
Oh
Polynesian
my God, I
tattoos.
love
For
that.
those
I
of you
love
that know
that.
me,
Well,
see that.
okay, so how old were you at this time in your life?
So I was 6 when we
Okay.
moved to Hawaii. And when we did, my mother remarried a local gentleman who was Mormon. And so I lived in a part of town, for those of you who aren't familiar with Hawaii, I lived in downtown Honolulu, which everybody gets all excited when they hear that, like, oh, great, a tourist destination, when in reality it is not, or at least not one that I would recommend to people, because it's the eighth largest city in the country, and it does
Mm,
not feel like a white sandy beach in the middle of nowhere.
nah.
And in Hawaii, particularly, there are certain areas where there's a lot of local people who are not too fond of white people, and I happen to be in one of those areas. Don't get me wrong, the Polynesian culture is my absolute favorite. I love them to death. But this particular area that I was in was very anti-white,
Mm,
and I was getting past the point of elementary school to go into high school. This is actually a really cool story that I forgot about. And the high school that I was going to go to, I forgot the name of it off the top of my head, but it was a public school and it was not good. It was
okay.
not a good public school. So I sat down and there's a school in Hawaii in Honolulu that's really infamous for football. I've always been into football, and it's called St. Louis. And there's a university called Chaminade right next to it. But
Mhm.
St. Louis is an all boys Catholic school. So
Okay.
it's not free. You don't just get to go because you're Catholic. It's actually a very expensive school to go to. And I did not grow up with a wealthy family or even a medium income household. So I sat down and I wrote a letter. And I wrote a letter to Father Mario Pariente, who was
Okay.
in charge of the school at the time. And I just wrote him a letter and I said, I'm terrified to go to this high school that I'm about to go to. I'm really into football. I love school. I love learning. And so I wrote this letter, sent it off, not thinking anything of it.
Mhm.
2 weeks later, Father Mario shows up at our house.
What? Okay. So did you where did that come from? Did somebody say to you, Brandon, write to this school? Or did you that was just something that got put on your heart and you were like, I'm just
Sometimes
gonna
I
do
think
it?
sometimes that still small voice just speaks to us to do things. And I'm
Yeah.
really grateful that in
Wow.
that moment I listened to that voice.
Yeah.
So I was just prompted to sit down and write this letter. And I did
That's
it. It was
amazing.
probably a 1 page long letter that I ripped out of a those composition notebook that are
Yep.
white and black in the front. I just ripped
Yep.
a page right out of that. And I got the address to the high school and I just wrote Father Mario Pariente and I wrote the address on there and off I sent it.
And then he just showed up at your house.
So he shows up at my house. My mom did not know I wrote this letter. Nobody knew I wrote this letter. So I'm in my bedroom and I can hear them talking at the door. And he explains while he's there. My mom's totally confused. I can tell in the way that she's talking with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I had already told my mom I don't want to go to this school. This is a school that I want to. And she already looked into how much it costs. And she said, there's no way that this is going to happen. So right at the door, she's like, well, we can't, he can't afford that school, yada, yada, yada. So he goes, can I just come in? So he came in, we sat down and talked, and Father Mario said, look, there's no scholarship for the school, but I want to pay for Brandon to go to school here.
What?
He paid for it himself
What?
to go. So I know that's a long story for this incident,
Wow.
but because of that, I ended up going to a Catholic all boys school. But before I went to school, a Catholic school, every morning I went to seminary.
Okay.
So in the Mormon religion, there's a seminary school. So I would go to Mormon
Mhm.
seminary in the morning, and then I would go to a Catholic school. We would do mass, we would do Hail Mary,
Yeah.
we do all that stuff.
Yeah.
So those are the two religions that I was raised with, was the Catholic religion and the Mormon religion. And
Yeah.
then fast
That couldn't
forward,
be any more different.
I know, very, very different.
Yeah.
And then fast forward to 2008 or 9 when me and Heidi really started dating.
Mhm.
Then we just started going to a non-denominational Christian church.
Okay. Well, I want to go back because there's like things that we did. There's like things that happen. Right. So he shows up at your house. Are you going to seminary before okay. So the seminary part of it starts when you're doing the seminary stuff, that I'm assuming that's the influence of your stepdad at that point.
Yes, because he was
Okay.
one. Yeah,
Okay. Okay. So your parents, your mom and your stepdad, how old were you when they met?
6.
Oh, so you were okay. All right. So then by the time you get to high school, you've already been in the Mormon church with him for years before all of this
Correct.
happens.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So did you have at that time, like, do you have any recollection of like whether or not you truly believed in God at that time?
I've so back again to that separation for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
I think there's two parts to religion. Again, I think
Yeah.
there's institutional religion, and then there's just you and God.
Yep. Yep.
And so when it comes to me and God,
Mm-hmm.
we've always been close. There's
Okay.
moments where we've been closer than others,
Yeah.
but I've always been very, very close. I've never doubted it. I'd always been. There's
Okay.
parts when I'm very, very angry
Yeah. Yeah.
and upset. And then on the institutional side, uh, I I didn't really have a connection. And this is
Mm-hmm.
no disrespect to any religion. I love
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
all
Yeah.
these religions are there, but I didn't really have a connection to the Mormon religion, and I didn't really have a connection with the Catholic religion. I love the
Mm-hmm.
fact in the Mormon religion how close they are with families and how
Mm-hmm.
important families are. But I've just institutional religion is not really a big thing for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just my personal opinion. I think it's great that they exist because it gives people the opportunity to be disciplined in their faith.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that first one that I explained is really ultimately the most important one, the one that matters.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah,
Yeah. I love that. So at the time, do you know, like, obviously do you know that God orchestrated all that for you? Do you know that? Like, did you know that at the time in your heart as all of
no,
that was
honestly,
happening?
it's only been up until the last 5 years that I made a mistake internally in my mind when it came to religion. Up until but from like the time I can remember saying my first prayer
Yeah.
up until about 35 years old.
Mm-hmm.
The prayers were, and if I could, if we could like listen to them, it would be like, "Hey God, can you give me this?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Can you take this pain away from me?" It was
Mhm.
basically just,
Demands.
yeah, me giving
Mhm.
demands and a wish list and all the things that I wanted.
Mhm.
And then when negative things would happen, I would put blame on it.
Got it.
When positive things would happen, there probably wasn't a whole lot of thanks, unless
Yeah.
it was just like the standard, oh, thank you for this, thank you for that, just like loose terms.
Right.
And so it wasn't until up until I was probably about 35 or 36 when I had my first like massive financial catastrophe
Mm-hmm.
that I really started to change the way that I thought and realize that God probably just doesn't want to listen to me asking for all these things,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I also changed the label that I put on all of the bad things that happened to me. I think most people probably do this, and I'm not chastising them because I'm blatantly admitting
Mm-hmm.
that I did it too.
Yeah.
Is we want to blame God for the bad things that happen. And I was really good at that.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really good at that. And I think I gave the example when we were at the seminar of being Lieutenant Dan, and he's on the
Oh
top of the,
yeah.
just like in the rainstorm yelling,
Yep.
cursing at God. Like I've definitely had multiple moments like that. Uh, but now that I've been old enough and have really strived to like do things in life, I'm realizing that the more hard things that I go through, the closer I get to God and the happier I am. I
Mm.
used to think that hard things were the devil.
Yeah.
I really
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
And I think that's really culture's view is if it's bad, it's of the devil. But I've kind of changed my perspective on it to where I'm like, you know what? If it's bad, maybe it's of God. Maybe like that is how God teaches us to grow.
Mm-hmm.
It teaches us to get all these qualities that we really, really look for. It gives us a clear perspective of
Mm-hmm.
knowing what's really, really great. At the end of James's book, his new book,
Mm-hmm.
it's a really interesting ending to the end. I don't know if you read the book, but every like books like to have a climax, at the end.
Yeah.
And then the end of James's book, this was his climax. He's talking about being at a Mexican restaurant with his family, being at a Mexican restaurant. And
Mm-hmm.
he had that moment where he just stood up. He sees all of his family. They're all happy. They're sharing stories. They're laughing. They're all together. And had it not been for all those bad things or those hard, in his case, hard things
Yeah.
that he put himself through, he wouldn't see that light that he
Right.
saw.
He wouldn't have recognition of how much he's actually been blessed and given. Yeah.
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 So when
So
you look back at some of the hard things that you've been through, and you alluded to, you said a financial catastrophe. When you look back at those hard things, can you see the point in time where maybe it was your own free will that maybe tried to force a situation, and maybe God tried to show you a different way and you just weren't having any part of it? And the only reason I ask that is because I've done that myself several times.
yeah.
So I
Yeah.
I wonder, like, can you see that now, like it was a
Yeah,
that
so
struggle?
I think most people, and me and you have definitely been both very, very guilty of this, I'm sure, is we try to play God.
Oh yeah.
Like we have total control over everything that's happening to us.
Mm-hmm.
When in reality, we we do have control to a certain extent. Like we can control, our work ethic. We can control our mental attitude. We can control certain things, but there's certain outcomes that we just simply can't control.
Mm-hmm.
We can hope for a great outcome, we can strive for a great outcome, but at the end of the day, certain things happen,
Mm-hmm.
and I've had multiple businesses fail very, very terribly. One of them because I made very poor decisions out of a lack of knowledge that now I have
Mm-hmm.
because I learned and touched that
Yeah.
stove. I
Yep.
paid that tuition, and I've had another financial catastrophe that actually had nothing to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
It was completely out of my control. In hindsight, there's nothing I could have changed that would have created a different outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really love Tony Robbins' term, and I don't know if he created this but it goes around everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
that life is happening for you, not to you.
Yeah.
And so that's really been a mantra that I think about. And I'll tell you what's really, really cool with this thought process. All the great things that happen to you, you get excited about and you appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
All the bad things that happen to you, you get excited about and appreciate.
Yeah. 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 I love to look at as things like that happen to me now. I think about what's coming. Like I'm going through this now, And I know there's light on the other side of this. So then I get excited about, oh, what's coming? What have I learned from it? Right. To your point, what tuition did I pay? We
Yeah.
definitely have that in common. What tuition did I pay? But then also like, gosh, this is preparing me for something so amazing that I can't wait to see what it is.
Yeah. And the hard part with that is it's very difficult to see in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult to see in the moment. It just as an example, I had two relationships prior to Heidi that were absolutely horrible. But
Mm-hmm.
in the moment, they felt amazing. They felt great. They were like, oh, I'm sure of this. This is great. This is great. And then it didn't work out and it ended. And I remember I can put myself back in those shoes at that time and go, man, I was absolutely distraught. But had I not had those two relationships, I probably wouldn't have a great relationship with Heidi.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think the problem with this is a lot of times we don't get to see down the road.
Mm-hmm.
We only get to see here and now. And so it's very easy. And sometimes, again, we don't have control. So it's very, very easy to create all these negative emotions in our head and to feel down on ourselves and depressed because we just don't see that light at the end of the tunnel. That's why I really loved, and I think everybody who was in attendance at James's event a couple weeks ago loved it because hope is real.
Mm-hmm. It is real. And it's funny because I look on it, Matt and I talked about it this morning. That's James's gift to give to the world. That's literally the gift said that he gave to James and said, okay, it's your job to go show people hope. That's your gift. I'm giving you this gift. You're able to create it. That's what your job and what you're supposed to do. So for you in your 30s, when you start to recognize this relationship more with God, was there like a pivotal moment for you at that time where it was like a light bulb went off? What did that look like for you when you really started to get deeper into that relationship?
Yeah, I've never, I wouldn't say there's any aha or specific times other than when things were bad.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm venture to assume a lot of people are very similar to this. The worse things are, the closer I get to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it does make you stop and wonder, like, why is that? Why am I not super close? Or I think everybody has that point in their spirituality where you can rate it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you get later on in life and you've had ups and downs and how that's affected your relationship, you can rate it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the bad side about doing really, really good is sometimes you let that area slip away a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
but for me, like, I got to be honest with you, Angela, I have always, always, always in my heart felt close to him. I've always known that there's a specific purpose for me and that have you ever seen that I don't even know what you would call it. It's a picture and it's a picture of a beach.
Mm-hmm.
Footprints is what it's called. Have you
Footprints.
seen
Yeah.
that?
Footprints in the sand.
I
Mm-hmm.
have all like, and it's funny, and for those of you that are listening that don't know the story, it's basically two sets of footprints, or I think just one set of footprints in the sand, and it's somebody talking with God, going, when I was going through all my darkest moments, where were you? There's only one set of
Mm-hmm.
footprints in the
That's
sand,
right. That's right.
and God responds back, I was carrying you.
Mm-hmm.
And so man, I just actually had a moment a couple of days ago when I was on a workout where I was like, I feel like I'm walking and there's two sets of footprints right now,
Yeah.
but maybe there's not. Maybe he is still carrying me. Like, I don't know. So, uh, what's nice about your spiritual connection is it, I don't think it's something that, and this is the same in my career in sales. I don't think you ever master it.
No.
I just don't think you
You're
ever
always
master
growing
it.
in it.
Yeah, you're growing, you're declining, and I really think there's four distinct areas of life. There's faith, there's family, there's fitness, and then there's fellowship.
Mm.
And I really think if you had to pick one that is like the foundation and the base, it
Mhm.
is for sure faith, without question.
Yeah.
Because I've had moments in my life where all three of the others were very, very great. but
Mm-hmm.
felt empty inside.
Mm.
And I've had the exact opposite where those three were kind of getting out of control, but I was just so focused on my faith and my spiritual connection, and I felt the best.
Yeah.
So if anybody is listening to this and they're struggling, no matter how they're
Mhm.
struggling, they just know like, hey, I'm in a hole right now. I'm in a pit and I can't put my finger on what it is. My suggestion to you is start with your faith.
So let's talk about that. So for you in those moments where things have been that hard for you, what is it that you do to bring you to that faith? Like what does
I'm
your practice look like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So because my faith is the strongest element of the four for me,
Mm-hmm.
it allows me to use the perspective of why, not why is this happening to me, but why is God letting this happen to me?
Mm.
What is
Okay.
God trying to teach me right now?
Mm-hmm.
And because I know that if I don't listen, I won't get out of it, or he'll do it to me again until
Yeah.
I do learn it. And because of that, it really shapes your brain into going, okay, every bad thing that happens to me isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's actually a good thing in disguise.
Yeah.
It's just a good thing in disguise. And you know, honestly, I feel really bad for people who don't have faith
Mm-hmm.
because then they have to rely on themselves
Yeah. Yeah.
and have to rely on their brain, and they have to rely on an outcome with a negative brain that they're trying to project a positive outcome for. And it's just with faith, it's easy to project a positive outcome
Mm-hmm.
because you know that everything is happening for you, like we were just talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is a huge mindset shift that I had myself, probably about 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. Because similarly, I grew up in a household with not a lot of love and support. You and I have talked about this, and when you're there, you feel very lonely. And I didn't have, the ability to. I really didn't know anything about God. I didn't know about Him. I never had. It was never talked about in my household. So I did. The loneliness that you have at that time when you have to rely on yourself because you don't have any faith. It's so heavy. So heavy. Such a great point. So
Mhm.
as you've grown and as you've gained an experience, like is there something that you do now as a spiritual practice to keep you close? Like what does that look like? I love, by the way, that you post all the time on social media and you post about God almost every day, and it's beautiful to me. I love that. I love reading them when you post them out. Um, so what does that look like for you now? Do you read scripture? What do you do?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I'm always talking to Jesus.
Mm,
I mean, I do 75 hard for the last
hmm
5 years. I've done it. And honestly, because of the amount of times that I'll fail and because I try to do live hard, which is 75 on 3 phases, I'm basically on 75 all my whole life for the
hmm
last 5 years. And because of that, I'll either do a run or most of the times I'll do a walk in my neighborhood. And there's a particular circle that I'll go around. And I probably have a bunch of neighbors that think I'm crazy and insane because when I tell you like I'm talking to Jesus, it's out loud.
Oh, I love it. That's
It's
so
out
good.
loud. And it's more real to me. Like I'll have conversations
Yeah.
with myself. Part of it is because I'm just an extreme introvert. And so I just, I'm
Yeah.
comfortable and I like being by myself and I'm not afraid to do that. But I mean, it's like any relationship, Angela. If without communication, it's dead.
hmm
Without communication, it's dead. So
hmm
that's the one relationship that and look, again, sometimes the conversation and the dialogue was negative, right?
Yeah, of course.
And we see so many things happen in our world where it's very easy to look at and go like how is this God? Like give me a break. Like how is this person dying, God? How is
Mm-hmm.
this thing happening in our world, God? How is this happening in our culture, God? Um, but I think for me, it's just that it's just communication with.
Yeah. So do you believe in the devil? Do you believe that there
Yeah.
there is okay. All right.
Mhm.
Yeah, I do too. I think for sure there is spiritual warfare, absolutely. I've had some other guests on the show who have talked about literal exorcisms that they've been a part of, helping to perform. And that's part of it. These conversations, to your point, you're having conversations like, why is this happening? Because it's not all under his control,
Yeah. And
unfortunately.
while we're on that topic, I
Yeah.
want to talk about a book that we talked about the event.
Hmm.
I'm sure you've read it. I've read it multiple times. It's probably at this point my favorite book of all time.
Hmm.
It's called Outwitting the Devil
Yep. I have
by
it actually, for those of you who want to see it, it's actually sitting right here on my desk.
so good.
Because I had it in another book club that I'm part of.
And even that book, just so that you know the devil is real,
Hmm.
even that book wasn't published until many, many years after the author died.
Hmm.
And like, because the devil did not want that thing coming out.
Yeah.
And so, just to give you a little precursor of the book for those of you that haven't read, and a part of it that like really hit me when I read it is Napoleon Hill, who's the author, basically is having a conversation with the devil. And it's like, that Jim Carrey movie, Liar, Liar, where he
Oh
can't,
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's like that. So, but the devil can't lie. He has to tell the truth. And here's a scary stat that was in there. And obviously it's a book. We don't know how true it is, but it really
Hmm.
made me think. The devil said, I own 98% of the souls that come to earth. 98%.
That's a big number.
98%. And as you read through this book and you start to see the strategies that he uses to
Hmm.
pull people closer to him, it will also help you because you'll be in those moments and you'll go, the devil's up to his tricks again.
Mm.
The devil is up to his tricks again. So I 100% believe the devil exists. I actually find it very, very hard to believe that there's a God without a devil.
Yeah.
There's good and evil is just part of the world that we live in.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree.
Get that
So
book. Everybody needs to get that book. If
everybody
you're
needs to get
listening
that
and
book.
you have not
Okay.
read that
It's
book,
so at the end of the show, I always ask every guest three questions, and one of them is about resources, books, and whatnot. So that one you don't get to say at the end when we talk about that part.
okay.
You have to pick a new one.
I'm no
Um,
stranger to books. I've got
I
over 1,000 books in my library, and I'm constantly ordering them. Justin Prince, just in the book that I'm reading
Yeah.
now, just mentioned
Hmm.
another book, so I ordered that. So I'm always ordering books, and I'm always reading.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So good. So what other things do you feel our listeners should know about your specific relationship? And we could talk too about, I love Heidi. She's amazing. I had the opportunity to meet her also. And, maybe about your relationship with her. Like, what did that look like? What did that look like for you? You feel like God gave her to you. You mentioned that a little bit ago. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I've had three people in my life where I look back and I go, like, I feel like God just introduces people to you.
Yeah.
And I have three that are like, there's no other explanation. There's no, like, it's not left a chance. Like, that one was hand wrapped and said, go see Brandon.
Aw.
Heidi was definitely one of them.
Yeah.
And just real quick, I won't dive too much in the weeds and you can stop me whenever you want.
Oh no,
But
go for it. I want to hear it.
one of the stories that people always ask when you meet somebody is, how did you guys meet?
Hmm.
you know? And it's always so funny because I shake my head sometimes because the truth is, me and Heidi met in a bar. We met
Yeah.
in a bar. It's like a funny story, but here's what's interesting about the story. I'm 19 years old. I shared a little bit about this. I'm just going to breeze through it now. But I grew up in athletics playing football, had a scholarship to BYU. I was hell bent on being an NFL athlete,
Hmm.
and it was taken away from me in an instant. And I lost my scholarship. I ended up starting a job, falling in love with it. And before I started that job, though, I'm literally renting a room from a family
Hmm.
in Mission Viejo, California, until my new job starts. It was for a couple of months. And on the very, very last day, all of my stuff is packed in my car. I packed everything in my car. And
Hmm.
I had a friend that I met at the gym there. And he goes, hey, I know today is your last day and I'm not going to see you for a while. He goes, "Why don't you crash at my house tonight and I'll buy you a beer?" Okay. So
This is going.
so I instead of driving to my new apartment,
Hmm.
I stayed at his house. We go to this little dive bar, right? And it turns out that Heidi's dad is in a band and he plays bass guitar. And so he's playing. And granted, I had just gotten out of one of those really bad relationships, and I
Oh
was
boy.
like, I don't want anything to do with girls.
Hmm.
I'm just focusing on my work and getting stabilized in my life, like I'm
Hmm.
in a mess. And so the way that this bar is situated is really weird. Instead of like theater seats, it's like long tables. And so you're sitting across from people. And so me and this guy are sitting across
Hmm.
from Heidi and her mom.
Oh.
And I was literally, even knowing everything that I just unpacked to you right there,
Hmm.
I sat down, I looked across the table, and I was like completely smitten.
Oh, well, of course she would be. She's
Like
beautiful.
completely smitten.
Yeah.
So I am, and keep in mind, I had no game,
And you were
none.
nine and you were 19.
19,
And you
no
were
game,
just the football guy.
just yeah,
Yeah.
the
Got
broke,
it.
living in my car
Yeah.
kind of guy. And so I look across the table and I'm trying everything. I'm like, if I don't try, I'm going to regret it forever. So I am trying everything.
Oh,
Nothing is working. Like
really?
she was not having it at all.
Really?
So finally, she gets up and
Hmm.
she goes to the restroom. And so it's just me and her mom. And
Mm.
so I look at her mom and I go, what am I doing wrong?
Oh, I love
And her
that.
mom, Gail is her name, she laughs and she goes, she just doesn't want to date right now. Okay.
Mm.
I ended up getting her phone number by the time we left. That's as far as
Okay.
like I was shocked that I got that. And
Yeah.
even with that, it took I think 2 or 3 more months for her to even go on a date with me.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But look, what the thing that's important about that is I really believe that we have these moments in life where we feel like we're being nudged.
Mm.
Because
Yes.
this is coming from somebody who's completely introverted, right? Just out of a bad relationship. I got no business talking to another girl at this point in my life,
Hmm.
but I felt nudged. What if I did not act on that nudge?
Yeah. What if?
And look, now she could have very well completely shut me down, never talk to her again.
Hmm.
But then I wouldn't have at least lived with the regret of going, man, I should have just said something.
Hmm.
I should have just asked. So, whatever you want to call it, I've heard it
What
called.
does that feel like to you? Like for you, what does that feel like when you're getting a God nudge? Because I get them too. What does that feel like for you?
Look, these nudges are always uncomfortable, right? Because they're not something that we would naturally do. It's
Hmm.
something that is out of our element, but we just have that voice whispering, saying, just do this, just do this. And most people don't heed to it. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I've always heeded to it, but what I have noticed is every time I don't, I regret it.
Mm.
And so, and like, most of the time, I don't even have to ask people. Like, they know. Like, when I talk about, like, you ever have that still small voice trying to nudge you to do something? Everybody's like, oh, yeah, oh, yeah,
Hmm.
oh, yeah.
Hmm.
I think when you don't follow it is when things start to spiral out of control for you,
Hmm.
because then you live in a what if state.
Yeah.
I can live with failure. I can live with making a mistake and having to pivot, but the what if,
Yeah.
that regret that's the toxic stuff that how do you get rid of it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good and so true. It's so true. Like the who was it that talked about it? Somebody at the event talked about the number one thing people regret when they pass. And
It's
it's
the longest study that they've ever done
yeah.
in recorded human history. They took people from like I think it was birth all the way up until their deathbed. Like it was so long that the researchers had to like take their stuff and hand it to the new team because they died and
Wow.
like the new team had to take over. So
Yeah. And what was the number one thing?
they asked people on their deathbed, like,
Hmm.
because what happened, what was interesting is some people became very, very wealthy financially. Some people became poor. Some people became drug addicts. Some people were in jail. Some people died early. But they asked all of them on their deathbed about happiness.
Mm.
And it was relationships
Hmm.
and the negative side of, you know, the I should have done this, the regret, I should
Yeah.
have done that.
Yeah. Yeah. So what made Heidi after 2 or 3 months finally decide to go on a date with you?
That'll be a podcast for her.
That's Heidi's podcast. We'll do that
That'll be a
podcast with Heidi
podcast
and see
for
what she
her.
says.
I'm just grateful that she did. Um, but let's just say it was very persistent.
Well, that's good. You allowed the nudges to keep working on you a little bit
Yes.
deeper. That's a good
Yes.
thing. So
Yeah.
good. So good. So, okay, we've kind of reached the point in time in our podcast where I ask some questions.
Okay.
All right. So now that I know that you're a voracious reader, there will be, I'm sure, more than one suggestion for this. However, the first question: what have you read or absorbed, okay, aside from the Bible and aside from Outwitting the Devil, that really allowed you to come to know God?
Hmm. I don't really read a lot of spiritual books outside of the
Mm-hmm.
Bible, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to books that brought me, I think honestly, every time that you're improving yourself
Mm-hmm.
is essentially a step closer to God.
Mm.
So um, I wish I knew a lot of really good books
Yeah, it
that
could be
might
podcasts,
take
could be
place.
somebody you listen to, somebody you've come in contact with. It could be
Yeah,
anything.
but
Yeah.
because there's so many golden nuggets in the Bible, it's like you don't really need another book for that area of your life. Um, But what I'll tell you the books that I love the most and
Yeah.
something interesting that they all have in common.
Hmm.
I love books on people who basically autobiographies of successful people.
Hmm.
And the one thing that all of these stories have in common is they had faith for a better future.
Mm.
Faith for a better future. They all had bad things happen to them.
Yeah.
They all had setbacks. They all had mental hurdles and battles, but they all had faith for a better future. So that saying that if you want to have more faith, you have to practice faith.
Yeah. Yeah,
And so,
absolutely.
what's nice is faith just kind of seeps out into all the other areas of your life.
Hmm.
So, as far as a spiritual book, I don't know. I'm going to listen to more of your podcast so I can hear.
Well, now that you've said that, though, I want to know what autobiography did you read that was the most influential for you? Like, who have you found the most influential for you?
Um, a couple ring mine.
Yeah.
The first one is Arnold Schwarzenegger actually has a really good autobiography,
Okay.
and it's very shocking some of the stuff that he went through. And then I think we have a mutual love affair for my friend Ed Milet.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I mean, I've listened to every single episode of his podcast from the beginning,
Yeah.
and so I know a lot about his story.
Hmm.
So that's a probably the best one that I can think of
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
Ed's story.
I agree. I agree. I'm not going to argue with that whatsoever. All right. So, question number two. We kind of talked a little bit about this. Um, as you grow in your relationship with God and you get those nudges and you get those moments where you really are kind of in connection with Holy Spirit, like physically that manifests for people in different ways. And so when you are feeling at most, maybe in the times where you've been carried or where you know that his words are coming through you, like what does that feel like for you physically?
Peace,
Yeah.
yeah. Uh, yeah, I think peace is probably the best feeling
Mm-hmm.
I can put to it.
Mm-hmm.
Because my brain, the wheels like to turn in my brain all the time. And I think just naturally as humans, we like to label things and then create emotional ties to those labels.
Mm,
And um, by creating a narrative for me in my head that, it is of God,
yeah.
it's impossible to put a negative emotion to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that though. And you're not the first guest to say that. I've had several people say you're just totally calm and at complete peace.
Mhm.
Yeah. So cool. Um, all right. So if you're looking back in your life to that night, not 19, you were younger than that because it was to start high school. So 15, 16-year-old kid when Father Mario comes to you, or you're worried about going to that other high school. All the things that you know now about your relationship with God, what would you have told yourself back then to settle things out for you?
Yeah, I literally would have whispered in my ear that the bad things are of God.
Yeah.
Like that's the one thing that, and I can't put my finger on when I took that shift, but it was in the last
Hmm.
5 years. And because I was just raised or just had this natural inclination that bad things are of the devil, good things are of God.
Hmm.
And and look, it may be that way. I'm not saying I know the answer, but I feel like good, God gives us that clear perspective by letting the bad things happen to us,
Hmm.
and our faith gives us the ability to fight through them.
Yeah.
So I would really just tell myself, like, if you want to win the battle, you have to like fight through the battles, knowing that they're for you,
Yeah.
and it's there's this thing that I like to say, and I really don't know if I picked it up from somewhere or if I made it up myself. I don't know, but I think God saves its toughest battles for his strongest warriors.
Yeah. I
And
I totally agree with that.
and so for some people, and I've had many scenarios in my life where I'm like, why is this happening to me? Like I'm a good guy, I don't deserve this. Like I didn't do anything to attract this to me. Like the
Mhm.
law of attraction we talked about with Joe Vitale at this last, like I don't know if I really, really did anything to attract this to me. It's just like this is just bad. And faith is important because it doesn't happen instantaneously,
Mhm.
and it happens with a time delay. And so faith gives you the opportunity to bridge that gap
Mm.
and to go, I don't know why this is happening to my right now, but because I have faith, I do know that in the long run, I'm going to have that moment where I look back and go, you had my back and I didn't realize it.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I agree with you completely. I think that God allows those things to happen to us so that we will rely on him. So that we will learn how to come back to him. So that we will put it's not that he's necessarily testing our faith, but he allows those things to happen in order to see where our faith lies.
Well, we have examples in the Bible of faith that's tested.
Yeah.
So we know that
Absolutely.
God tests our faith. You have Isaac being asked to sacrifice his son on an altar,
Yes.
his only son, after like, I think they were like 90 or 100 years old when they finally had a son.
Uh-huh.
He's asked to sacrifice him. So, like, yes, they're tests.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And let's hope we all pass with flying colors.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, if we knew that that was the case, if we knew that because God has so much faith in us that he gives us something really, really hard,
Hmm.
it's almost like you can look at it and go, well, I want to make them proud of me. I want to make him proud of me.
Hmm.
And so the way that I do that is I embrace it with open arms and I get past it. And then here's the miracle in getting past it. And what when I look back a lot of times on like, why did that happen to me? Why did that happen to me? It happened to me so that I could help somebody else.
Exactly.
Had that not happened to me, I couldn't have. Ed Milet's dad is a perfect example of this,
Yep.
right? His dad's an alcoholic for the beginning part of his life, changed and got completely sober, right?
I know
And
so
he
many.
talks about waking up in the middle of the night one night screaming, somebody help dad. Like somebody
Mm-hmm.
help my dad get sober. Well, the
Mm-hmm.
only reason the guy was able to help his dad get sober is because he was an alcoholic himself. He
Mm-hmm.
got past it, and now he had the ability to help others. So that's another checkbox on the proof side of like God gives us these things so that we can overcome it to help other people overcome it,
Yeah.
aka hope.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And I so agree with it. So agree with it. Well, we unfortunately are nearing the end of our time together, which is a bummer. So if is there anything else, nuggets of wisdom, because you have lots of those, that you would like to share with the audience today before we wrap up?
No, I would just say because this is a faith-based podcast, which I
Mm-hmm.
love, um, don't be a closet Christian, right?
Yes.
Do not be a
Yes.
closet Christian. And I think this stems from us seeing people on the streets with those signs that are like, come to Jesus or you're going to hell, or like all that kind
Mm-hmm.
of stuff. And so maybe it comes from that, or I don't know what it comes from, but don't be a closet Christian, like especially for maybe some masculine men that think,
Mm-hmm.
it's weak of me to portray this. It's not. It's arguably weaker the other way by you not. So, by the way, we're happiest when we're around other people that share our values.
True.
The best way to find them is to portray them.
I
So
love
when I'm
that.
on social media, I'm very vocal with my faith because I want to be surrounded by other people of faith.
Yeah. I love
And
that.
it drives those people closer to you. So I would say, don't pretend to be somebody you're not.
Mm-hmm.
Pretend to be the person that you want to be in the moment. And uh, don't be a closet Christian, right?
Yep.
Be vocal about it, right? Be very, very vocal about it, especially with your kids. If you guys have kids,
Mm.
be vocal about it. Even though I was raised in a household of, quote unquote Mormon religion, we didn't talk about it. It was more them just going through the steps.
Mm.
Just it, that's why I have a little gripe with organized
Yeah.
religion.
Yeah. I feel the same way. Faith, I feel like this organized religion gives people almost like a pass where all they have to do is go to church once a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, everybody is going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I know that if I have conversations with God, if I go to church on Sunday and I am always in my head knowing everything great happens because of him and everything bad happens because of him, it keeps me close. That's all I need. Now, that's me. And
Mm-hmm.
it's taken me years to figure that out. And I'm sure as years pass, it will change, hopefully in a positive way. But everybody's different, and you need to start cultivating your relationship.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you a great way to start. If there's anybody on here who is like, you know what, this God thing, the spiritual thing, I don't really know. There's a song. I don't know if you've heard the song. And if you have not, you need to listen to the song. The first time you hear it, you're probably going to cry, right? And it's an elevation. Do you know elevation worship?
Yeah.
Talking to Jesus.
Mm.
If you have not listened to this song, Talking to Jesus, start with that.
Yeah. I'm going to put that in the show notes so make sure everybody gets it. Did you want to
Put a
sing it
link
for
to it.
us today?
I am a horrible singer and I will ruin it for sure. Uh, for sure. Then they'll never want to listen to it. So I definitely won't ruin that. But start with that song. Find a church that you love, find people that you love that praise his name, and communicate with him.
Love it. I love it. Well, Brandon, thank you so much for being on today.
Thanks for having me on. It was fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And where can the where can the listeners follow you?
I'm really only active on Instagram.
Okay.
It's and shows you how active I am. I don't even know my handle. I just don't know if my middle name is on there or not. It's Brandon Bartron.
Okay.
Brandon Brandon, Bartron Bartron.
Beautiful. And we will have that in the show notes too. So thank you all for listening to Evolve Through God today. Brandon, thank you so much for coming on and being such an amazing guest. And we will see you all with the next episode.